I've always wondered how EA actually determines the change in your ranking from one week to the next in Dynasty mode. Like if we're the number 10 team in the country and we win, what makes us number 7 next week? And is it possible for us to predict it? Well, good news for you guys, the answer is a strong yes. By the end of this video, you're gonna know what actually matters in terms of your change in ranking from week to week, what I was super shocked to see, and I'll even leave you with this helpful little calculator that you could actually use to quickly see a good guess of where you're going to be ranked next week based on how you did this week. Now, all this started when I was in an online dynasty and I was on the bubble of the college football playoff, and I thought that if I won my conference championship game by a lot, that would make me more likely to make the playoff than if I only won it by a little. And that makes intuitive sense about what we see in real life. I mean, I still remember back in 2014, the Ohio State Buckeyes sneaking into the first ever college football playoff, largely because they dominated Wisconsin 59-0. Would they have jumped TCU and Baylor if that game was 20-17? I don't think so. So that leads us to our first question. Does margin of victory matter in college football 26 when it comes to their rankings? And unfortunately, I think the answer is a very firm no. In order to get to this, we have the results from over 300 games across 2 different years. We have 4 main things to look at. What was the media rank of the team before the game? What was the media rank of their opponent? How much did they win or lose by? And when during the season did this happen? We'll get to why how deep you are into the regular season matters in a minute. But for now, what I could tell you is if we know that you won the game and we know how much better or worse you were than your opponent entering the game in terms of the media ranks, then how much you won by does not matter. Including that margin of victory stat does not change our accuracy in predicting how much you're going to move up in the ranks. In fact, just as an example, let's take you as the 20th ranked team playing against the 25th ranked team in week 1. And also, let's say about 20% of the teams ahead of you lost, because obviously that's going to matter too, right? Like if you win a game, you're more likely to jump people if a bunch of people ahead of you lost. Well, in this scenario, what happens if you win by 1 point versus 10 points? Well, if you beat them by a point, we would expect you to be about 12th in the rankings. And if you beat that 25th ranked team by 10 points, we would also expect you to be 12th in the rankings. But okay, Max, what about blowouts? What if you literally beat this team by 100 points? You beat them 100-0. What would a basic model think about that? Well, we would think you would get all the way up to 10th or 11th in the standings. And if you take one model with margin of victory and a model without margin of victory and put all their predictions on the same chart, you get this. I mean, it's so similar that there is a red line behind that blue line that we could hardly even see because the trend is so similar. As much as I wish margin of victory mattered, if you could control for how many teams above you won and how the game was expected to go by looking at your rank and your opponent's media rank, then margin of victory just doesn't matter. So okay, Max, what does matter? Well, when we try to predict how much you are going to improve in the rankings, like I mentioned earlier, the basic things that we would expect to matter in real life do matter in this game. If you won the game or lost the game, that's obviously the most important factor. How much you won it by, again, irrelevant. But the 2 other things that are very important is what chunk of the teams ahead of you won or lost, because if a lot of them lost, you would obviously jump up, and that makes total intuitive sense. And also, how much were you expected to win by? That's right, if you take your media rank and you take your opponent's media rank, the bigger that edge is, the smaller your boost in rankings is. But if you're a massive underdog, we would expect you to jump up quite a bit. Now, if I were to ask you about all of this in real life, there's one thing that I haven't yet said about the game that you would probably say in real life. Did this game happen early in the season or late in the season? And that leads us to the last variable that is behaving exactly the opposite of how I expected it to. I would have thought that if you won a massive upset early in the year, that it would matter a lot more than late in the season. And the reason why I thought that is because if you were to win a massive upset against the top team in the nation at the end of the year, that's just one more win on your overall 12-game season. But if you do that in week 1, that is the season so far, right? Like they thought you were the 18th team in the nation when you started, and then you beat the best team out there. That is all that the world has to go off of you. Well, it turns out that this game actually has the opposite effect. And to show you, let's dive into 2 models that I made and how this week thing is actually impacting them. Okay, new camera angle unlocked, guys. I will share this spreadsheet so you can go on your computer and mess with it yourself, but I think this will be the easiest way for me to show you how this is working. So again, fundamentally what we're trying to do is predict your rank next week based off of a few things. Now those things right here are: what week is it in the season, where do you sit in the standings pregame, and where does your opponent sit? Now for the data set that I have right now, I only have data on week 1, 8, and 14 across 2 different years. I intentionally chose those because I thought that the early part of the season would be important, the very end would be important, and then I wanted something in the middle. But that also means that these are just fundamentally different games from one another. In week 1, most good teams are playing garbage non-conference opponents. So expect a lot of gap, a lot of edge between the main team and then their opponent. In the middle of the year, you got conference stuff, but in the end of the year, especially week 14, you have rivalry week, which means that these games tend to be more competitive, and also the media ranks of these teams, in my opinion, tend to be a little bit closer because they're rivalries for a reason. Except for Tennessee Vanderbilt. Go Vols, that's all I'll say. So to keep it simple, guys, what we're doing is we're keeping weeks 1, 8, and 14 as just 1, 2, and 3 right here. So let's say it's week 1, so we're gonna change that to 1, and we were the 25th rated team, and we beat the #1 team in the nation. Well, with a basic multiple linear regression, we have a couple of different variables that get multiplied out, and this is our predicted rank after week 1. As you can see, that pre-game contribution is one of the heaviest parts, and because this is only for wins, we know that you're gonna move up at least some amount, so there's that -2. The edge moves it up a little bit more. In fact, watch that 1.16 here for just a second. What if we beat the 24th rated team? You see how all of a sudden you don't get as big of a reduction? Now we would expect to only jump up to 21st in the rankings, but if we were to beat the #1 team early, we would jump all the way up to 20th. Now there's one more thing in here that's a little bit more complicated, so I won't go into too much detail, but basically there is an interaction between how deep you are in the regular season and the rest of the variables, specifically your pre-game ranking. So let's keep this example, right? We were the number 25 team in week 1, we beat the top team in the nation, and our formula thinks that you're going to be about 20th. You'll jump up from 25th to 20th. A reasonable guess is anywhere between like top 12 to maybe you actually fall out of the rankings, which obviously isn't super likely, but imagine if number 26 and 27 and 28 all won also, like maybe. But we think you're going to move up a few spots to 20th. Well, what happens if you beat the top team late in the season in week number 14? All of a sudden, we actually think that you would jump up to 15th. Again, early in the season, this win would get you up to 20th. In the middle of the season, this win would get you up to 18th. But if you beat the top team late in the year, we think you jump 10 whole spots up to 15th. And that interaction that is going on is that pre-game ranking and week number ranking. Now, the reason why it's an interaction is because that jump from 20th all the way down to 15th, just because it's later in the year, it doesn't happen naturally. Like if you were 100th overall in the media rankings, which there is a way to go and see that even if you're not in the top 25, and you beat the top team late in the year, you'll jump up to 68th. But if you did it in the middle, it's only 77th. And if you did it early on, you're only up to 87th. Think about that for a second. You are not even a top 80 school, and you pull off the upset of the year. This game thinks that you'll move up a little bit, like 10 or 15 spots. Like I said, that's the opposite of what I expected. But the more I think about it, the more that actually kind of makes sense. The teams that are top 10 early in the year, those rankings exist, but they're not like really firm rankings. If they were super accurate, James Franklin would still be the coach of Penn State, and they wouldn't be so bad, right? Like those are educated guesses early in the season. Now, if somebody, say UCLA, pulled off an upset against a top 5 rated Penn State at the end of the year, well, then that win matters. I mean, then that win is thoroughly impressive. But if Penn State just loses every game, then maybe the UCLA upset isn't as shocking. So I'm not mad about this, but what I will say is there's actually 2 different formulas, because what I found was that losing really does not matter who you lose to. In fact, it's not even an input in this model. All that I care about right now in order to accurately predict our post-loss ranking is where were you pregame and how deep into the season are you. So again, let's say that we were top 25 right at the edge there and we lost to the top team early in the season. Well, we would expect you to drop down to about 37th, which again, isn't too crazy. If you think about how many teams between 25 and 37 probably won their game, that's not a crazy jump. What's interesting though is again, late in the season, if you lose, this really gets held against you. I'm not entirely sure why this gap gets larger and larger, but you could drop out of the top 50 if you lose late in the year. I don't know if I fully understand why this is happening, but I just wanted to show you the most accurate ways that is also super simple where we only need to type in a couple of numbers. Now, if you look at ways of evaluating performance, R squared gets thrown around a lot. And both of these models can explain like 97, 98% of the variance in your post-game ranking based off of these basic inputs. Now, what I'll tell you is though, we could get like 93% of the way there if you just tell me what you were rated pre-game. So instead of using R squared, which a lot of people tend to use, I want to talk about what the typical miss these models are going to make. For winning, we've actually been a little bit more accurate. I think that's partially due because of the amount of wins we have against FCS schools. So we just have more wins to look at than losses because there's no media rank for FCS schools. But either way, for a loss, we would expect this model right here to be off by about 8 or 9 ranks on average. That's why we have this range built in right here to where if we think that you are going to drop down from 10th down to 22nd, in reality, you might drop anywhere from as little as 14th all the way out of the top 25, really depending on a lot of more complicated things that are outside of our control. I wanted to build something that is really basic, that doesn't require a whole lot of effort from us, because I don't want you to have to go and count, okay, how many teams below us lost, how many teams below us won, and try and do all this. Like, let's not do that. Now, the winning formula is actually a little bit more accurate. I would say that the typical miss here is about 5 or 6. So if we think that pregame you are 15th overall and you beat the top team early in the year, we think 11th is pretty good. So actually these windows are now shorter because I corrected it. But if you look, we think you'll be anywhere from 6 to 16. So this is kind of just a fun thing that I can't stop messing with today. Like, what if we beat the top team in the nation late in the year? All of a sudden that jump goes all the way up from 11th all the way up to 8th. In fact, late in the year, how good do you have to be ranked to jump to the top team in the nation if you beat the top team in the nation? Can you do it at 8? Maybe. I guess it's possible in the low end of the range, but we wouldn't predict it. What about 5? If you're number 5 and you beat number 1, will you jump to number 1? Maybe. So again, that's well within the typical error that this could make, so it's not a guarantee, but I just think this is a fun little super basic model that you could use for both winning and losing to see what you're most likely to get to next week. But really, what these models do is they helped confirm a lot of fundamental knowledge for us. We now know that margin of victory does not matter. So if you're late in the year and you think you need to run up the score in the conference championship game in order to make the playoff, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not going to do anything. What will do things though is winning games against opponents that are better than you. And apparently doing it later in the season will have a bigger impact whether you win or lose. Again, I don't know if I fully understand that part, but it's there. Like I said, I'll share a version of this in the video description so you can make a copy and fill this in yourself and experiment with some of the results. But what if I told you we could also maybe predict if you're going to win a game based off of your team's overall and your opponent's overall? That's right, I was writing down all of this data by hand anyways. I figured I might as well grab that. So if you want to see how much of the simulation logic in College Football 26 is based off of the pure overall ratings, what I need you to do is take a 10-pound hammer and just smash the subscribe button. Please don't actually do it on a piece of electronics. I do not want the liability, but genuinely consider subscribing. I'm making that video here in a few days. Can't wait to show it to you guys. Hopefully this was helpful. I'm done hanging out in the corner. Peace out.